Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to tune in today to our webinar masterclass on recruiting autistic talent and potential. This is the first masterclass of a series that we're going to be delivering over the coming months as part of our new and exciting partnership with IrishJobs.ie. At the launch event of our partnership on the 1st of April, we revealed our collaborative report, Autism in the Workplace, evidencing that almost 4 in 5 autistic people face barriers to employment in Ireland. While it's currently estimated that at least 1 in 65 people in Ireland are autistic, we're still seeing that 85% of autistic people are unemployed or underemployed. This is the reason why AsIAm and IrishJobs.ie came together to champion autistic talent in the workplace. This journey starts with the rollout of our new series of monthly employer masterclasses and training programs covering a range of topics related to recruiting and hiring autistic people. Employees can register for these masterclasses on asiam.ie. We've 3 amazing speakers here with us today to share their unique insight, expertise and experience with us, and I've no doubt that we'll learn so much from each of them. We're going to be hearing from Jess Hendricks, Maria Reardon and Nicholas Sunshine, followed by a Q&A section at the end to conclude today's masterclass. So please, if you have any questions throughout the session, you can type them into the Q&A box and we will be able to address those to the speakers at the end. The first speaker that we will now hear from is Jess Hendricks. Jess, through her work as head of Hendrickx Associates, supports autistic people to build self-awareness, identify their goals, and together with the person take small, manageable steps towards them. She's had great success with previous clients, helping them to gain control of their life. Jess has a diagnosis of autism and dyslexia and has experience of helping late diagnosed autistic adults come to term with their diagnosis, focusing on their concerns and mentoring them to be able to accept themselves for who they are. So we're absolutely delighted to have Jess here with us today first. Thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you for having me.
So we will hand over to you now at this point, if that's okay, to present to us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely perfect. I'm just going to share my screen, so just bear with me 1 second. Right then, hopefully you can all see that. So today I'm going to be kind of talking about recruitment and interview process and how employers can make this more inclusive for autistic people. Oh, sorry, my thing's not working. There we go. Session overview. So I'll sort of go through the recruitment process. So job adverts, person specs, application forms. Also some kind of tips around sort of interviews, verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and these are coming from the point of view of an autistic person, from what you might see if you are interviewing an autistic candidate. Ideas on locations as well, because location of the interview can be quite important for people. Greetings, and finally some kind of interview adjustments, and then to kind of top it all off, right at the end, I've just got some little tips for you to remember when you are dealing with autistic individuals. So the recruitment process itself, job adverts. Obviously, you know, you want to be getting the best candidates coming forward for your jobs, and there are ways that you can make this more inclusive for autistic individuals. Use plain English, be very concise in your wording, no buzzwords, no things like get your ducks in a row and blue sky thinking. These things make absolutely no sense whatsoever. They're all nonsense, and it's not, you're not showing somebody exactly what you want from them if you're kind of using this sort of language. Be very clear with your deadlines as well on job adverts. Just keep it all really clear and easy to read. Obviously this helps autistic people, but it also helps non-autistic people as well. Be very specific in your job adverts, and you know exactly what it is that you want from somebody. And again, the same with the person spec as well. Be really specific. Don't use terminology like team player or effective communicator. These are things that really might put autistic people off. If they feel that they are an intrinsic part of the job, and it's something that they really struggle with, then they're very unlikely to sort of come forward and apply for those positions. So really keep it, very, very job related. Again, clear. So bullet points, what you want, skills, experience, that kind of thing. Base it on the job, not the personality of the person that you're looking for. Autistic people can be absolutely fantastic at their jobs, but may not understand the kind of social politics that go on within offices, for example, within the workplace. So try and keep that out of the person's spec. Application forms, again, concise wording, clear layout needs to be really clear. Which bit of information goes where. Give people a decent sized space for them to disclose if they want to. One of the things that I suggest to autistic people is that if they are disclosing on a job application form, then they will assume that the person that is reading it doesn't know anything about autism. So if you can give somebody some space for them to be able to tell you exactly how their autism, how being autistic affects them, and the differences, but also the pros as well, so they can put all of that in there. And get creative with your application form types. So instead of it just being a written form, consider doing oral, over the phone, video, maybe other forms of applications. Get creative, think about it, think about what other people might be able to benefit from. And advertise, this is really important down here, advertise that you're open to making reasonable adjustments, and any ways that you've already made the process more accessible to autistic individuals. People are more likely to come forward if they think that you are on their side, and that you're not going to discriminate against them. This is something that I hear a lot of, about people, not autistic adults, not wanting to disclose because they are convinced that they will just be put to the bottom of the pile and put straight in the bin as soon as an employer sees that they are autistic. So when you're interviewing an autistic individual, these are some things that you might notice. So the non-verbal communication, this is body language, like I've written here, eye contact. Eye contact for autistic individuals can be very, very painful, physically can be painful. It can also cause them to not be able to concentrate on what they are saying or what you're saying to them. If they are having to take in all of your face, all of the surroundings and the words and what they're doing, this is where you have the problems with eye contact and the differences with eye contact. So you might have somebody that makes too little eye contact. They may be looking all over this place. They are listening to you. In fact, they're probably listening to you more than if they were trying to maintain what is deemed as a normal amount of eye contact. You may also have somebody that has been told throughout the whole of their lives that eye contact is very, very important. And if you don't do it, you're rude. So you may get somebody that's just intently staring at you. Again, don't be put off by this. This is just somebody trying to do what they either think is right or do what's right for them to be able to get through this process. Body language might not be very relaxed. They may mimic you as well. I have heard of, I worked with a woman who used to mimic people's body language, used to mirror them, and also used to mimic their accents as well. So she was with somebody who had a different accent to her, maybe a stronger accent, she would copy that. Again, this is just somebody trying to get through this process. So please don't judge them, and please just accept that, they're not taking the mick out of you at all. They may miss some kind of subtle cues. Maybe if you're looking a bit bored, if they're talking too much, they may not get that. They may not understand when to stop or start talking. So just give them some hints, and I will come over this. I will cover this a bit more later on. They may also miss when the interview is over. So be very clear in what you're saying. Say, thank you, the interview's finished now. It was great to meet you. I'll show you out. And this can really help people and you as well, not just be sat there in sort of awkward silence. So verbal communication, again, these are just some kind of tips on, and I will go over this in a bit more detail in a second, some kind of tips on how they may communicate with you, and also how to kind of, adapt your communication style as well for an autistic candidate. So don't ask odd or unrelated questions. Don't ask them what their football team is, if it's their favourite football team is, if it's not related to the job, or hobbies, or kind of things like that. Again, don't use buzzwords, jargon, acronyms, especially if the acronyms are company related. People will just not know what you're going on about, and that's not just autistic people. A lot of autistic people find it really hard to understand sarcasm and jokes. This very literal, they will just take, or may just take, what you're saying at face value. So if you are, try not to crack the jokes, try not to use too much sarcasm, because it's the potential is that it will just go completely over their head, and that they will not be able to understand that you're having a laugh or you're having a joke with them. They may monologue. If they get onto a topic that they are very interested in, or they don't know how much information to give, you may have somebody in front of you that continues speaking for a prolonged period of time. Don't be afraid to stop them. Say, that's great, thank you for the information, let's move on, I need to ask you some more questions. The chances are they won't be offended. They will probably be quite glad that you have taken the lead on this, and that you have asked them to stop and moved on to the next subject. So avoid open-ended questions, use closed questions. So a little idea here is, tell me about yourself. You may get a life story. So instead, because that's not really specific enough, say something along the lines of, do you have any experience of when you did this task? So that's a closed question. It's a yes, I do. And then you can follow that up, again, being specific, with something along the lines of, in your last job, please give me one example of when you did this particular task. This gives somebody parameters to work with, rules to work with. Okay, this person they now know that they want you to, you want one example from when they have done this kind of thing in the past. Don't ask questions like, how did you find your last job? They may say on the internet, when actually what you're really asking them is, did you enjoy your last job? Use specific language. This is really, really important. So be direct, going back to the kind of monologuing, getting somebody to stop talking, be direct. Autistic people really struggle to read between the lines, especially in a high pressured situation like an interview, where you're trying to remember everything that you've ever learned, how to come across without looking a bit weird or a bit different. Just be direct with these people. We won't be offended at all. So the location of the interview, this is quite important. Take into account potential sensory differences of an autistic individual. So you're talking about here, sound, smells, lights, that kind of thing. Is it going to be really noisy? That's going to cause a massive issue. So don't suggest that you meet up in a cafe, for example. Maybe if you've got a quiet room in an office, perfect. You shut away. Maybe if there's blinds in there, close the blinds so that there isn't any kind of distraction from outside. If you've got an office with a flickering light, avoid it. Flickering lights are really difficult for autistic people, can be really difficult for autistic people that have got sensory hypersensitivities to do with lights. Offer a Zoom or Skype interview. I know at the moment that's probably what most people are doing, so it's a little bit different. But when we go back to whatever normal is going to be after the last year and a bit, it may be better for them. They'll be in familiar surroundings. There'll be no commute into the office or into the workplace. and there'll be less sensory overwhelm as well, that they'll be in control of their environment. And this is the most important thing to remember with autistic individuals, is the environment is key. And I will get onto this sort of in a second. So next I'll sort of talk briefly about some ideas of interview adjustments. Obviously this list isn't exhaustive. There is lots and lots of other things that you can think of, that you may be able to think of to come up with. But I think the best thing to do is ask somebody if they need any adjustments. They might not. They may have disclosed that they're autistic, but not need any adjustments made on that particular day. But give them the option to. But this, over the next sort of couple of slides, these are just some ideas that I've come up with that I think would be very useful for autistic individuals. They've worked with some of my clients in the past. They've also worked for me as well. And this is something when I was working when I wasn't self-employed and was applying for jobs, I didn't know that I was autistic. But I was sat there the other day writing this and thinking, okay, what would have worked for me? What would have been kind of useful adjustments that I could have asked for? And if I do ever go for a job in the future, I will ask for. The top one is sending questions in advance so that I can read over them. I'd be able to process the information beforehand and come up with some ideas of exactly what it is that they wanted from me. If there was anything I was unclear about, I could ask for clarification from somebody that I knew, that would be able to be a bit better at maybe reading between the lines, that kind of thing. Giving clear directions to locations. Offer them pictures of the office if you can do, or if there's something on your website, for example, or the shop, the warehouse, wherever it is. Be very, very precise in your location. If you've got a dodgy postcode that sends you 3 office blocks down the road, make sure that they know that. And again, like I say, pictures can be really useful prompts. Give details of the interviewer, full name. Again, if they want it, offer pictures of them as well, so they know exactly who they're meeting with, so it's not a surprise on the day, that they have a picture in their mind and they can prepare for this. Offer for the candidate to bring supporter or advocate. This won't be somebody that will answer on their behalf. It's not somebody that's there to do the interview for them, but it's somebody there that could potentially be a translator. Maybe if there's any questions that they don't understand, that they can reword them for them. And it might just give them, the candidate, a little bit of extra support, knowing that somebody's there that they know, a kind of safe space as such, if you can't offer the interview via Zoom or Skype, for instance. Also give clear instructions about what to do when they get to the location, sign in, who they're seeing, where they need to go, all of that kind of stuff, just give it all in advance. And again, make sure that they know that you're open to making these reasonable adjustments for them. So on the day of the interview, this could be done before as well, but on the day, give information on the order of events. How is it going to happen? Are there tests involved with this interview process? Is it that they're going to be seeing one person and then another person? Break it all down, give it to them in written form, so that they've got it to go back to and look at if it's going to be a sort of a longer interview process. If it is a long interview process, offer breaks, but say, I think it's maybe time that we take a break now. Would you like to go, use the bathroom, get a drink, that kind of thing. But show them specifically where these places are. Don't just say, oh, it's down the corridor, 3 doors on your left. The chances are that their brain is working so hard to process the information from the interview that they'll just not be able to find these places very easily at all. Again, with the interview questions, focus on practical skills rather than social. Like I said earlier on, ask for an example of when they did a certain task rather than when they were a team player or went above and beyond. These kind of things. Just keep it job related, and keep it practical. So give clear information on when they will hear back. And if you can't stick to those deadlines, still email them, still email them and say, I'm really sorry, we haven't come to a decision yet, but we're hoping to in 5 days' time or on this date or something like that. Just keep them updated, Autistic people love information. Without it, we don't do very well at all. Right then, so finally, some kind of things to remember. Don't assume. Every autistic person is different. I've got a family full of autistic people, and we are all very, very different. We need some adjustments made for some things and not for others, depending on who we are. To be honest and ask them, I'd much prefer somebody said, I'm really sorry, I don't know how we can, what it is that you need specifically. So could you tell me? That would, in my opinion, would earn massive brownie points for a potential employer, that's for sure. And yeah, be honest, if you don't know much about autism, ask, if there's a YouTube video that they suggest that you watch, or a book to read, or somebody to talk to about it. This is really important stuff. Autistic people love information. Lack of information equals having to guess and overthink. And that leads to being completely and utterly overwhelmed by all of the possibilities, and not knowing which one is the likely outcome at all. If you put me in any situation that I'm not comfortable with, the chances are that I would have thought of about 1 million possible outcomes to that situation, and would have probably got it wrong anyway, because it would probably all been fine. But if you're having to guess and you're then becoming overwhelmed, you do tend to come to the worst case scenario of what's going to happen, that it's going to be awful. So try to give as much information as possible. This little equation at the bottom, this isn't just for interviews process and the recruitment process. This is, if you've got autistic employees as well, this is the most important thing, in my opinion, to remember. The autism plus environment equals outcome. Dr. Luke Reardon wrote this in a book called Autism and Asperger's Syndrome in Adults. It's available on Amazon and other places to buy books. And it's a fantastic book. It's very, very short. It focuses on the social model of autism, and not the medical model. So it's not that autistic people have a deficit, it's just that we're different and that we process information in a very different way. So with the autism plus environment equals outcome, obviously if you have an autistic employee and they have to hot desk, for example, this isn't going to be a particularly nice environment for them, not knowing when they're coming into work, where they will be sitting every day, having to sit here, there and everywhere. They won't have the right things with them. They won't be able to keep their papers or folders or something in a drawer, for example. And this outcome is going to, the outcome of that is going to be an autistic person that's incredibly overwhelmed every single day that they come into work. Even before they get to work, the chances are that they will be, have high levels of anxiety. So if you can manage the workplace so that the environment for them, whether that is an interview or whether that's a day-to-day, is beneficial for them, then you are going to have a productive worker, and that's a win-win for everybody. Obviously, there are reasonable adjustments and there are unreasonable adjustments. I made a joke with somebody the other day that said, you can't ask your employer to put a bed in the corner because you want to have a nap every 5 minutes. That's not a reasonable adjustment to make for somebody. But if there is a quieter area of the office that they can set up shop and set up their desk and their space, then that is a reasonable adjustment, in my opinion. And like I say, win-win. You'll all be better for it. But right, that's me finished now. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you've been able to take some things away from that.
Thank you so much, Jess. Really, really appreciate that. And there were some fantastic practical strategies there that I think everybody will be able to take away with them to make the interview process a lot more accessible for autistic people. So thank you so much for sharing.
No worries at all.
Brilliant. Next, we have Maria Reardon, who is Global Director of Public Relations at International FinTech EML with headquarters in Brisbane, Australia. Marie qualified as a journalist in 1994 and completed a journalism course at the University of Cambridge on the 25th anniversary of her original qualification. In 1988, Marie began her career in national radio and TV, and in later years, she entered the history books for her documentary with Mother Teresa in India. She's established communications businesses in the US and Europe, and is a former advisor to governments, royal families, Olympic teams, and Fortune 500 listed companies. Marie is a member of the Public Relations and Communications Association and the Academy of Marketing in the UK, and is a member of the Forbes Communication Council at Forbes.com. She is also a part of the autism and the LGBTQ+ communities. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marie. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone, and to Jess and Fiona, yourself, and everyone joining us. Really absolutely delighted to be here, and so much of what Jess shared and taught us today has been prevalent in my life and career over the years as well. So it's been very interesting to get some questions from your colleague Fiona, Adam, in recent days, and the first question that he wanted me to focus on was your experiences of the recruitment processes as an autistic person. And I think what's really amazing for me, you mentioned about our HQ is in Brisbane, Australia. That's true. And the team today are actually at the Women Leading Tech Awards in Sydney, because EML is nominated for the Advocacy 2021 Award for Diversity and Inclusion in the workplace. So we're really proud of that. And I think the trajectory here over the years in diversity and inclusion is really another one of the reasons why I love, cherish, and adore what I do. And I think it's absolutely amazing to be able to come to work, and some of our corporate values include awesomeness and openness. So to answer the question, I'll break it into a couple of easy parts. And the first is, my experience has gone from fantastic in recent years to disappointing. And I remember some years ago, I was sitting down with the managing director of a very well-known company in Dublin. And we got onto the topic of neurodiversity and neurodiverse hiring. And he turned around to me, he looked me in the eye, and he said, well, why would we ever want to hire people like that? So whenever, whether it's in the United States or Ireland or whatever country I happen to be in, I always find that negative experience an opportunity to educate. So of course I launched into my monologue. No, I chose a point of reference, I suppose, to educate, and it was amazing for him to turn around a short time later and go, oh, well, I never thought of it like that. So very, very interesting experiences like that over the years. What I found is, I'm quite like most autistics, very outside the box. I wouldn't fit into the box even if they tried. And that can lead to shutdown in some companies, and with attitudes as well. And also it can be something as simple as not even realizing, as Jess said, that the lighting in a company or an environment or a meeting area or a canteen or wherever you are is flickering. And it's funny because here in my home office, I've been working from home since the 18th of March last year with lockdown. And every bulb in this room is flicker free. And every screen, I've got the widescreen TV, which mirrors the work laptop, and my cell, everything, every screen in my home, in my workplace, in my environment is always set on eye care or on night mode. And that really, really helps me. And also I've got every filter you could possibly imagine in my HD high definition glasses as well. So that really, really helps. And lighting is something so simple and so universal, but it's not what companies tend to think about. And I really have experienced that attitude starts at the top. And I've been really lucky in recent years that right from the global CEO to every member of staff, there's 500 of us here. It's so amazing that diversity and inclusion is a given. It's not even a question mark. You know, I'm autistic and I'm gay, and it's never ever been an issue. It's a non-issue. And that's fantastic. And they wouldn't think twice about hiring someone like me. And those diversity and inclusion stats also now include the fact that we're at 50% parity in our hiring. And I think that's really, really important as well. So move on to a second question, and that was, so Marie, your attitude towards common recruitment processes as an autistic business leader. Okay, well, the first thing is, if we can normalize difference, I mean, that's going to be a huge milestone itself. I think it's always really lovely when I see that companies actually say and have it in black and white, we're autism friendly. I think it needs to go beyond, diverse and inclusive. I think if you actually say we're autism friendly, I think that makes a huge difference. People with autism, we actually work extremely well with people and teams. And people are so surprised that, like, I'm a person, I talk for a living, I meet people for a living. And so those assumptions and misconceptions are all over the place, if you like. It's funny, something that Jess said as well. And I remember years ago when I would be going for job interviews, and I would be really worried, perhaps 24 hours before, and saying, maybe ring my mom and say, well, what if they crack a joke and I don't get the sarcasm? And now I'm at a stage in my life, it's kind of like, and the world is still going to go around. So, over the decades, I would have started in my profession 33 years ago this summer. And I think I've learned a lot, and I've grown into my skin as well over the decades in this process. And now it's like, and I don't get a joke. So what? My colleagues know she's not always going to get the sarcasm, and that's fine. And also, I would love to be able to educate interview panels on the fact that, dress and footwear and expression, we're outside the box, and I'm extremely expressive. And it's so funny because I often hear the comment, particularly in Ireland, not abroad, about, jeepers, like, you're very Italian in how you express yourself. And I'm going, actually, I was conceived in Spain. But it can be different for an Irish interview panel that way. What I'll also say is, yes, I was that kid, I am that adult who will always cut off the labels on the clothing because they're scratchy and annoying. It's not like I can just walk into any store and just get the first suit or dress for formal workplace or for a job interview type situation. So it takes me a lot longer to find a suitable clothing for me with the material that's not going to be annoying my skin. I have a severe sensory processing disorder, which I've been taking steps to manage my entire life. So sensory integration therapy has been life-changing for me. The other thing is, since I was a young child, because of pretty bad dyspraxia as well, and also my interoception, proprioception, and vestibular systems were underdeveloped in the womb. So my balance and coordination are pretty bad. So I've been wearing orthotics, professional shoes since I was very young. And they were really clunky and terrible and awful years ago. And I got teased mercilessly and targeted because of it. And now it's like, it's just like, yeah, I wear orthotics. And they may not go perfectly with the dress or may not go perfectly with the suit I'm wearing, but they keep me walking right, and I don't fall over. So I think that's much more important for health and safety, isn't it? And another question that Adam would love me to address is how workplaces can make recruitment processes and interviews more accessible for autistic people. And I think the most important thing for me is when the company and everyone, as a collective, can open their minds. And Jess is right. If you can walk in that person's shoes, if you can appreciate through training and understanding the sensory experiences that we have, and how I interpret and see the world and experience the world every day. And the other thing I always say to people is, I'm autistic 24 hours a day. I can't just flick a switch and turn off my autism during working hours. So I think there's a wonderful appreciation where I am in the company I'm with EML, that, you know, you come to work as you are every day, and that's it, complete acceptance. It's non-negotiable, and that's a beautiful experience to be in. And just to research the facts, because, you know, I usually reference this, but in 2017, when Harvard University released their paper saying that your competitive advantage in your company is hiring neurodiverse people, it was a huge breakthrough career-wise for so many people, including me. And I think that's the way to go. I think appreciating how amazingly we can thrive with the right company, with the right attitude, with the right people, with the right teams. And that's what I wish to share right now. So thank you, Fiona, and everyone here today.
Thank you so much, Marie. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed at the beginning whenever you said every negative attitude is an opportunity to educate. And that's something I really strongly believe myself. I think whenever you're a member of the disabled community, the autistic community, and you're diverse, as an autistic adult, it can be quite easy to be offended by negative attitude or by misconceptions. But by flipping that around and seeing it as an opportunity to educate, what we're actually doing is creating more understanding for other autistic people that will follow us. So I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. And thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences.
Absolutely, most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks a million. So we now have Nicholas Sunshine, who is an autistic self-advocate from Waterford. He is now working with Sun Life, a Canadian financial services company, mainly known for providing life insurance, and their offices are based in Waterford. Nicholas will be speaking a little bit about his employment journey, including the barriers he faced to securing employment, and how support groups in Waterford helped him to navigate the interview process and develop the skills and confidence he needed to succeed in his job. So thank you so much for being here today, Nicholas. I'll hand over to you now, if that's okay.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I'd just like to thank AsIAm for inviting me. And I'd also like to thank the previous two speakers. I really appreciate what they've said, as I could really identify with some of the information provided there, especially about the blue sky thinking. I actually had to Google that one, so much appreciated. To start it off, as you heard there, I'm Nicholas Sunshine. I'm from Tremor, County Waterford, and I've been chosen by AsIAm as an autistic person to share some of my workplace experiences and my experience on being on the other side of things as a potential autistic new employee. So just a bit of history to me. Sitting in front of you today, now I'm successfully employed. I live in a nice apartment by a seaside, and I have a good quality of life. But if you were to rewind that back 3 years ago, it wasn't such a good story. I was actually homeless at the time and in an unhealthy work environment, and I was in a really bad place with my mental health. But nowadays it's much better. So what I learned from that was to never underestimate having the power that having a supportive working environment actually provides for you, especially for an autistic person and their life and their well-being. I shall now tell you about my work journey and how I got to be here, and just jobs that I've had in the past. So first of all, I started my career on the railway, actually, in the UK, just with an agency. I found that quite difficult, as you probably heard earlier, not knowing your shifts or being shifted around to different places, I found quite difficult. They would ship me out to different stations to go work. But through that job, I managed to get a job permanently on the railway, which I was actually really, really good at. The reason being is because as an autistic person, I was able to really fit in with the structure and the rules-based working environment. It was very, very easy for me to fit into it. It's very good. I did leave that job, unfortunately, as I was moving to Ireland. when I first moved over to Ireland, I got a job just temporarily, I thought at the time, was in cycle sales, like push bikes, just to get me over here so I could move over with a job to go to. I didn't enjoy the sales that much. However, in that job, I did find out that I was very good at building bikes, as they all come flat packed, which led me to being offered a job to train as a cycle technician. As my way of working was really the best in cycle repairs, I really excelled at that, gaining attention from the national manager, in fact. Even though I was good at the job, I found it very hard to work there though, because the physical conditions were quite poor. It was a loud environment, very cold, and the work hours would change really regularly. And again, it was something that I found very difficult to do. Sometimes there's the odd occasion I turn up and I was supposed to not be there or be an hour late because they changed the roster the day before. So that was a big barrier for me. I couldn't keep the organization up to actually function the way I wanted to in that job. Whilst I had that job, circumstances did arise which required me to move into a new rented accommodation. And that's the point where I found myself homeless. Finding a place to rent in Ireland was quite difficult. I did end up in a men's shelter because I couldn't deal with so much change so quickly. So the pressure from work and then the pressure from having to move house at the same time, it just didn't work for me at all. And that's where Cara stepped in. So Cara Outreach from the National Learning Network is where I got the support from. And they're with me today here in the meeting, supporting us even at this moment. So from Cara, what they were doing for me, they were providing weekly sessions where I learned to manage expectations of myself, my assertiveness skills, and how to promote myself properly, and strategies for coping with stress, communication in the workplace, all that sort of thing. They were really, really good for that. And they gave me lots of different new skills to be able to function again. And with the help of Cara, at this point, I applied for a job with Sun Life Financial, and Cara ever since have been supporting me from behind the scenes. My current job now is an insurance coordinator with Sun Life Financial, and to date has been very, very good. In fact, a lot of the topics that the first two speakers have actually mentioned, they've actually complied with. They've been very good for me. So I was asked a question. There's a few things here that I have to cover. And the first one being was, how was the job advertised? Of all the jobs I've taken so far, 100% of them have been advertised online, which does provide a bit of an insight there right away for you. And I've had online application processes, but there've been application processes where they've allowed you to take your time and think about what you're going to put in the box rather than setting any sort of time limit. So I get the best answer I can in there, and it removed the pressure for me to have the answer straight away on the spot. So was it accessible? Of all the jobs that I've taken, the job advert's been very straightforward. Again, which gives you another insight there to which jobs I have actually applied for. And they've all listed exactly what's involved, what paperwork would be required, and there have been no guessing to be done, including the salary. Now, I think that's quite an important part for any autistic person going for a job, because we do like the information and we do like to know for future planning. If it's an unknown, then you don't really know how you're going to combine this job with your life and your lifestyle. It's very difficult to work out how to do that. It does create a big barrier. Sorry, bear with me here. So some employers state they are an inclusive employer and welcome diversity. Luckily, all the jobs as well I've taken have been with quite inclusive employers. They've all offered to provide adjustments so far to the interview process, although I've never actually availed of the chance to do so yet. As personally, I felt until most recently, I've always gone into interviews with a don't ask, don't tell attitude, which was quite a sad thing. But recently, I feel that's starting to go away now. And we are able to disclose, which is a really good thing. Yes. However, most recently, I have asked for some changes in my current workplace so that I can be more productive in the workplace and focus on my strengths, to which my employer basically just took my medical history as authorization and just let me do exactly that. Now I'm very productive and I score very high reviews every month. I'm that person that the manager never has to meet because it just isn't required, and it's now a bit of a running joke in the company. Every time I join a group meeting, "Oh, Nick, you still work for us?" I do. It's actually ideal for me because I like the structure and the routine, and once I'm in the routine, I pretty much will stay in that way for as long as is required. Also, because of my different perspective, I tend to spot things that can be made better in processes within the company quite often. So they do get a lot of, they call them continuous improvements. So I submit a lot of improvements to the company as well. So my next topic here is about the interview process and the interviews themselves. As for the interviews, I've always been invited to all of them first by phone, and then a letter by mail to my address to confirm the details. As an autistic person, I do find taking phone calls out the blue quite troublesome. They do give me the chills quite a bit, but as I was expecting a call, should I have been successful in my application, I was able to pick up and speak with the various HR departments, but it wasn't easy. Before the interviews, I've always been told where and when to arrive and offered assistance should I have needed it, which was very good of them. At longer interviews, usually where they contain assessments, I've been notified how long I should expect to be there and what sort of questions will be asked. Being told which sort of exam paper I'd be sitting, that sort of thing, which I found very beneficial. Knowing what to expect really did help me out and to calm my nerves and to allow me to function properly. For the interviews that usually last an hour or less, I've never been told the questions prior to my arrival or during the interview, which did leave me a little uneasy and perhaps not performing at my best, but perhaps that is partially my fault for not asking for any of the adjustments, which I feel nowadays is a lot easier to do. So the interview process again for me is consisted of two stories. The first one where it felt like an interrogation in some places where I've been interviewed, where the interviewer was trying to see how much pressure that I could handle, with often hard, unrelated to the job questions after questions, sometimes followed by a role play scenario. The questions often had answers that I grabbed seemingly from the air without much true likeness to my personality. I just didn't have the time to think about what they actually meant. It was difficult to process all at once. I needed more time to formulate the response than what was provided, basically. Role play scenarios, I only ended up with one way for me. I just act back at the actor that's acting at me. I felt unable to provide like a true representation of myself during the role play. It just ends up with me just projecting a facade and having the interviewer none the wiser to who I actually was. As an example, some years ago, I entered one of these interviews with no company names mentioned. I was asked sternly to sit in a specific chair and bombarded with expectations, and I had my answers cut short by the interviewer talking over me rather than suggesting they move on after literally only producing a sentence, and the interviewer staring straight at me in the eye, and I was able to let the interviewer know any meaningful information about myself and felt very apprehensive there. And the second story has been better with interviews, such as arriving at a reception, then being collected and welcomed into an office further into the building, a much quieter place, with a cup of tea and having a structured chat based around the job description. During these types of interviews, I've been able to open up about who I am, what I've done in my past, which makes me right for the job I've applied for, Having a relaxed conversation prepared me for the context of the questions to come, which were slipped into the conversation later on. For reference, I find uncontextualized questions very hard to answer, especially, usually coming in back at them with another question asking for the context, because I just wouldn't understand it otherwise. To summarize though, 3 things I felt employers did that I found helpful as an autistic person. Number 1 was advertising a clear, concise information about the job. The second thing was having the application online in a clear, well-formatted entry table with no pressure. And number 3 was taking time to make you feel at ease, having the interview in a quiet back office. Those were the 3 biggest things, the 3 basics that I found really did help me. 3 things that I felt the employers could improve on for autistic people. The first one was a big one. It was learning autistic behaviors. Once you understand these behaviors, you really can understand who you have in front of you. The second one is not use pressure-based interview scenarios, as they don't work with autistic people at all, at least in my experience. And number 3, proactively providing support should it be needed. So they may tell you they're autistic, but it does help if the employer can engage with that as well. That's it for my piece here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. That was really, really interesting. And I think the combined experiences of all of our 3 panelists today, there's been a wealth of information that everybody here today will be able to take away with them. We do have a few questions which I'll address to our panelists, if that's okay. The first question that has come in is for Jess. And it was in relation to you mentioning about sending questions in advance to the person prior to the interview. Does this mean the actual interview questions or answer any questions the candidate might have? If it's the interview questions, do you feel this is a fair process for everybody else?
That's a good question, actually. I did see that pop up on the Q&A, so thank you for that, whoever asked. I do mean the interview questions in advance. I personally feel it is a fair process for everybody else, because everybody else doesn't need the additional time to process those questions and the information that's wanted from them, and also to be able to translate them into a way that they know how to answer them. I'm not talking about giving them a week or 2's notice. You could send them 48 hours in advance. Sort of give them enough time to be able to, but you could also offer, if you don't feel that is fair process for everybody else, you could also offer everybody else the opportunity to have the questions in advance as well, to level that playing field. But that is what reasonable adjustments are. It's leveling the playing field for an autistic person or a person with disabilities to be able to access things in the same way that a non-autistic or non-disabled person would be able to.
That's great. Thanks so much for that. And something that we actually do, and we do that with the AsIAm interview process, but another option as well is to print out the questions that you might be asking to have them in front of you too, so you can process them both visually and through what you hear. So I think that I totally agree with everything that you've said there, Jess. Another question then, and we'll address this to Marie, if that's okay. My company is very keen to improve efforts to be more inclusive in our selection and recruitment processes. We'd like to attract more neurodiversity to our workforce. Can you let us know ways to do this in an authentic way?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is start with the ad. Have it in there, Another thing, okay, that's my bread and butter, and I'm a global director of public relations. Do a press release, tell the world you're looking for neurodiverse individuals in your workplace. What a great story. There's been a fantastic uplift in recent years with us in the company, like thousands of stories on diversity and inclusion. So add your company to the growing list of diverse and inclusive companies in the news every day. I mean, that's just a couple of the easiest points I can give immediately that a company can implement in the next hour.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. That's some really good advice. I have a question here for Nicholas, if that's okay. And I think the reason perhaps why you might be best to answer this is because you mentioned that you previously found it quite difficult to disclose that you're autistic. You said there was a don't ask, don't tell kind of attitude. So there's a question that's come in here. If the candidate has not disclosed in advance of the interview, do you have any advice on how they can get an equally fair interview as all other candidates?
Hi, thank you very much for the question. Quite honestly, I don't think there will be as an equal chance to have a shot at the interview, quite honestly. I did sit at home preparing quite heavily for these interviews and researching the company to get as much information as I could. I was trying to work out for those interviews themselves what questions they might ask about the job, and trying to learn specifically language based around the jobs I was going for. I found that actually gave me an edge, being able to focus more on the technical side in the interviews. That's where I excelled in the interviews myself. But in regards to autism in the interview, if you don't disclose it, then they aren't able to make the allowances. So you do put yourself at disadvantage there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that, Nicholas. Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. So I have a question here which I will address to Jess again, if that's okay. So many jobs are recruited through agencies who, in my experience, may act as a gatekeeper when the word autistic is mentioned. Do you feel that this may be a significant barrier?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you are using agencies, then maybe you could tell them that do not discount people that have got autistic on their, or autism or any disability on their application form. You know, it is, unfortunately, there is a lot of stereotypes and still a lot of stigma around autism in the public domain. But if you can be that employer, that company that tells them that it's okay, that you want, you know, you are actively looking for people from, you know, all different walks of life, genders, you know, or everything, then I think that hopefully that can help a bit. But yes, I do think it is a significant barrier.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, is to be the employer who says, well, actually, we're actively seeking neurodiverse and autistic individuals, and don't forget that the agency is working for the employer.
Exactly.
So if you're instructing them to do so, then that might be the best way of removing that barrier.
Absolutely. And maybe say to them, you know, I'm only interested in their experience. I don't care about the rest of it. I just want to know about their experience. And just pick people out for those purposes only, please.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. Okay, final question, and I'll address this then to Marie, if that is okay. As HR manager in my organisation, the style of interviews are very open, with a cup of tea, to know the candidate after providing job descriptions and the information for the role. Considering that usually autistic people or those with disabilities do not share or do not disclose during the interview, how do you feel, how do panelists feel about an open interview, or how could it be modified to get the best out of the candidate in that style of interview?
I mean, every interview should feel like a safe space, right? I think in recent years we've come so far in Ireland on opening the conversation on diversity and inclusion. And I even myself, when I went for this role, I very much voiced, well, tell me more about diversity and inclusion in this company, and you know, gender balance and all of that. And they were probably one of the best companies in Europe, and now one of the best companies in the world at it. So it was an easy conversation for me, really. But you know, there is not a week goes by where I'm not contacted by a family somewhere in the world, and they ask me, okay, just a diagnosis of my child, can they have a normal, whatever that is, life, and what about when it comes to the interview process? And you know, some people say they do not want to reveal in the interview, and I completely understand that. Not everyone is like me and out there, okay? Out, as they say in Ireland. But I think having a very open and frank and authentic conversation on expectations when it comes to diversity and inclusion and what that means, because it's going to be very different for every company. And for us as well, you know, the female parity is huge for us in a technology company. And also me being a woman in tech and in international banking. And for us to have 50-50 parity, that's a milestone in itself. So every company needs to clearly define their diversity and inclusion role.
Yeah, and to totally normalize having those conversations as part of the interview process, no matter how open or informal it might be.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think we will leave it at that for today, everybody. It's been fantastic to have such an amazing panel contributing today, but also thank you so much to everybody who came along and attended the masterclass today. We're delighted to see such great numbers, and we really hope that you'll come along to our next masterclass, which will be next month, again in partnership with Irish Jobs, and we'll be very excited, and you'd be very welcome to come along. But if you have any questions following this, please don't hesitate to get in touch to info@AsIAm.ie. Otherwise, we'll look forward to welcoming you next month to our next masterclass. Thank you very much, everybody.